Well, we've all seen it. We've all experienced it. We've all been next to the world's worst deer hunting neighbor. And that could be for a lot of reasons. And I'll skip down to number 4 right here, the obvious. The obvious bad neighbor is one that is a trespassing scum, and they steal and they damage, they vandalize. I've actually had one of those in the past, and it wasn't very enjoyable because you always felt like you never knew what was going on, and I'm sure that some of you have experienced that same thing. And those are difficult ones. And we're going to talk about what we can do with some of these other ones here, but on that one, the best advice I can give you is to come down heavy and hard as soon as you own the land in the beginning. The longer you let a neighbor like that take advantage of you, and yes, they're taking advantage if you don't prosecute, if you don't turn them in, if you don't stop it in some way, it will get worse. And it'll probably get worse with not only them, but their friends, their family. It just keeps getting worse. It's a snowball effect. But if you take care of it right away in the beginning, with neighbors like that, in the UP of Michigan, I had people that trespass. Just twice. One time I tracked them down literally with a funny ATV track, found them 7 miles away on different dirt turnoffs, got back to a home, talked to a woman, came out, and it happened to be her son, and she was upset with him, not me, and pleaded with us not to prosecute. He had ripped up a clover field, drove around a fence, smashed some trees, and we didn't. We knew that it was going to be taken care of. You could tell by his mother. That was awesome. Had another one where it looked like a husband and wife, helmets on, ATV. I literally put up signs and went to the couple local party stores, and then also and put up flyers, reward, and for these trespassers, that kind of thing with a picture. And never heard anything, but at the same time, we never had them come back. So you have to come down heavy and hard, even up to prosecution, and that's on those obvious ones. But here's some that are less than obvious. And I'm going to start with number 1. You have that deer hunting neighbor. And let's say, you know what, I'm going to explain you, and what we're trying to build right here is, you know, you're trying to work on the land. You're trying to hunt it really well. You're trying to make improvements that match your ability to hunt the land so that you can reach your herd potential. It doesn't mean that you're even going after the biggest buck in the neighborhood every year. It means you're trying to build a great herd and meet your potential for the land that you have and your resources. You're just trying to do your best. No different than at your job, at your sport that you like, a passion. If you're playing softball, golf, whatever it is, you're just trying to do your best in something. And so when you have a lot of time and money invested in land, you just want to do your best. And sometimes neighbors can greatly detract from that. This first neighbor right here, you know, you're trying to do everything you can, and you have this neighbor next door that owns the land. They don't hunt very often. They don't do anything to the land, but they come in, and it seems like you're working all summer long, spring, summer. You're scouting in the fall, or scouting in the winter. You're hunting in the fall. You're trying to do everything the best you can, and your neighbor keeps shooting these big bucks, and the big bucks on camera. And maybe, you know, being neighborly, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if it happens over and over and over again, you might think, man, you know, it'd be cool to tap into those every once in a while. And so sometimes you have that kind of neighbor. Not a terrible neighbor, certainly not the world's worst neighbor, but they're not contributing to the herd. And what I mean by that, they're not building the herd. They're not creating habitat improvements. They're not doing the same things you're doing. And there's a reason for that, and a reason you'd want them to do that. A quick example, I've had about 2 clients out of over 1,000 that asked me specifically not to work with their neighbors. And I tried to explain to them that it's a good thing if their neighbors are doing the same thing they are. And this is an example of a neighbor that wouldn't be doing the same thing. They're hunting well, they're shooting those big bucks, they're shooting the deer that they want, but they're not really building anything. And so more power to them. You know, I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying anything bad about them in any way, but more power to them. They're just not building with you. And that's why I think there's something we could do with that. Hey, sorry to interrupt this video, but my web class series is finally begun. How to design your whitetail property is on my website, and there's a link in the description. Please check it out. Number 2, and it seems like these two go together all the time. They drive their ATVs all over the property, and they shoot everything that moves. You know, kind of disturbing the peace and not contributing anything. They're taking, they're shooting whatever they can. And we'll talk about each one of these, but that's the kind of neighbor I hear about the most. You know, this is a QDM neighbor. These neighbors hunt selectively over here. They're not shooting much. But then these neighbors over here, oh boy, if a deer goes over there, they're dead. They're always going to be gone every time they get there. They're driving ATVs all over. They spook everything. If I have my stand 100 yards away, the deer come running. I don't get to see them on my land. They clear my land too. I hear it all the time. That's, quote, the bad neighbor in the neighborhood. Number 3, you have that neighbor that is spending tens of thousands of dollars. You know, you have 60 acres, you worked your whole life, you saved, you bought it, you earned it, you're trying to do what's best within your resources, and then you have a neighbor that has 200 acres and they have a $70,000 tractor and drill and whatever other toys that they have to go along with the property, and it just seems like you can't catch up. You can't do anything about it, and it can almost be demeaning. And I've seen those situations where a client wants to do their best, they have me come out to help them work within the resources, but then they have that neighbor next door that's just spending an incredible amount of money. I've heard of that, friends of mine in Minnesota, where they're talking about their neighbor as 400 acres, 800 acres, and they plant 40 acres of food plots, and they just feel like they can't compete. And that could be a daunting, really a daunting outlook when you look at your neighbors that way. And so, yeah, again, these aren't the world's worst neighbors. I'd say the world's worst neighbor is that one right there that's actually thieving, stealing, trespassing, damaging. You know, that's something you have to deal with right away. They are the world's worst neighbor. But these three up here can be bad in their own right, even though they're good and they're doing nothing wrong in their own right. I want to talk about this right here. Imagine when you get these three neighbors right here on board, and they each do the same thing that you're doing. It's not that you have to slam it home. The most ineffective way to get your neighbor on board to doing the same thing is not to go. The most ineffective way is to go over there and say, you shot this. You shot what? I can't believe you did that. You shot this little 6-point to spike. We've talked about QDM. We've talked about this, that, and totally ineffective. You know, antler shaming them. It's a terrible thing to do, and in fact, you have to take the opposite approach every time. Congratulations. You can go as far to say as, have you been seeing any other bucks? And, oh, this is the only one I've seen. And you could say, hey, there's these bucks running around too. It's pretty cool. Maybe you can get one of these, you know, next time. They're out there, and you show them, you know, pictures of Mo and Larry and Curly, whatever bucks you've named, and they're giant bucks, and do it like that. You know, show them what's available, what's out there. The whole reason you're doing this is what I've found. And kind of get back to, I don't want you working with my neighbor. But what I've found is you by yourself, you can create something. You can influence a herd. You can be the influencer, the herd influencer in the area. What I find is that, imagine if you and your neighbor are doing the same thing. Man, it is incredible. And what I find isn't double the potential, because your neighbor has 60 acres, you have 60 acres, you're like-minded, you're doing the same thing. I find it's triple the potential. Your potential is much greater than the sum of the parts. And that is a great thing. And it's because you do the same things, you hunt the same way, you hunt hard, you match your property. They do something over here, you do something over here, but it's all complementary of each other. The bucks that live here, the bucks that live here, by and large, spend more time on each of your properties, and for that, your potential is so much higher than just the sum of those two parts. 3 times the potential, 4 times the potential of just those two neighbors together. That's why you want to work together. Plus, it's fun. You can actually share trail cam photos. You're working towards a common goal, and then it kind of boils down to who hunts it the best and who chooses the best days to hunt, who chooses the right stand at the right wind, the right time. And you can talk about that too, because if you're both hunting well and you both put your plans together, you both put your properties together well, then you're going to find that not only is your potential a lot higher, the overall average age structure, sex ratios, easy to maintain the populations and balance with the habitat, because you have a captive herd that you can target at any time, especially does and fawns. But it's a lot of fun. It really is. Each one of these neighbors, this great deer hunting neighbor, so much better if he's actually building the herd and helping you out with that. And then if you take his skill set, maybe you're the great habitat person, he's a great hunter, you share those ideas together and you both work to improve each other as a team, and you'll benefit. This ATV brown is down. If you have that type of neighbor, they do very, very little damage. Those type of neighbors hardly ever shoot the big buck. They might luck into them every 5-10 years, something like that, but they're spooking way more than they shoot. They're just over there having fun. Don't worry about them. Let it be a lot lower stress. It's kind of like this person, look at it as a team, not a competition. This person, look at them, let them do their thing. Who cares? Not really a big deal. And this person right here, guess what? Maybe help tap into the resources. Maybe you have more time than money. Maybe you can work together to work on things. Maybe you can have that property over here where there's less stress, more balanced amount of food, you have cover. There's always positives to every property. There's always a way to make it work, and boom. You know, in the end, you both can build something. Your neighbors can build something. I find, unless it's the obvious really bad neighbor, there's really not a lot of bad neighbors. And even those neighbors that are shooting those small bucks, like this number 2, they're shooting that small buck. Why would you antler shame someone if you have older bucks around the area? Shouldn't you rejoice that they didn't shoot one of your named bucks? That they didn't shoot one of the 3, 4, 5-year-old bucks that are running out? They burned a tag on a smaller buck. Who cares? There's plenty of bucks to go around. I was never one of those that looked at a neighbor and thought, why would you shoot that small buck? We can't build anything. Don't look at it that way. Look at it as a positive spin. Look at it as something, how can we take each one of these neighbors? We take even this ATV brown is down neighbor. They obviously love to hunt. They have a good time. Maybe just talk to them and talk to them about what's working. A lot of times if you lead by example, you show what's working on your land, how you've built the herd over time to this number 1 person, what's available to this number 2 person, and maybe what you can do more on a hunting scale, what you can do by offering work to that person that has a lot of resources and spending a lot of money, and you work as a team. Teamwork is always best. Staying positive is always best. Forget the antler shaming. And really, what's the world's worst neighbor? In the end, sometimes it's ourselves. We need to look in the mirror, our reaction to other people. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I react poorly sometimes, you know, but really, when you think about it, the world's worst neighbor in the neighborhood when we're a deer fanatic is often ourselves. We can turn that around, work as a team with your neighbors, and great things can be accomplished. That's why they have co-ops all over the country where like-minded deer hunters getting together, wild game feed, sharing trail cam photos, success stories after the season and non-COVID times. In February and March, that was that time of year. Really look at it as a team. How can we work as a team? Take one of these each individual neighbors, look at the unique perspectives and positives that each neighbor brings, except for this obvious bad one that you need to prosecute right away. And enjoy the season, a lot less stress, looking at it as a team instead of teamwork instead of competition.